Hey everyone, Walsh here from Thin Line Defense, and welcome to our first episode in our low power variable optics series. In this first episode, we're going to be reviewing the Primary Arms 1x6 Raptor in first focal plane. Now, I do want to say that this entire low power variable optics series has been sponsored by Primary Arms. They provided us with all the optics we're going to be testing through this entire series, and also by Wylde Tools. Wylde gave us all the tools that we needed to install all these optics properly, and we really want to thank them for sponsoring the channel. Any of the things you see on these videos will be links down below so you can purchase them for yourself. So let's start taking a look at that Primary Arms 1x6 Raptor in first focal plane.
First things first, we need to have some upgrades around here. So let's give it a, there we go. There's some Wylde love. Let's do that one more time. Here we go. All right, now we have the tools we need to install these optics.
Okay, so before we get too far, let's talk about what a LPVO is. It's what's called a low power variable optic. When you go to look one up, you're going to see it's going to have two numbers usually in the front. In particular, this one is a 1x6, which means it has a 1 times magnification and then goes all the way up to 6 times magnification. So this is classified as a scope, and there's two different types of scopes. There's second focal plane and first focal plane. So in this video, we're going to be reviewing a first focal plane scope, and in our subsequent video, we're going to be doing a second focal plane scope and then comparing the two and see which one you like better. So what does it mean then to have first focal plane? So in a first focal plane optic, what makes it really cool is the reticle actually changes size. So at 1x, the reticle is going to be quite small, and then as you zoom in, that reticle is going to get larger and larger. Now, what really makes this cool is the actual Primary Arms ACSS reticles that it then uses. So it actually has bullet drop already measured into the actual reticle. So you can see from any magnification what you need to do for a bullet drop right on the reticle at any range. So if you're at 1x, you still have the proper measurement to make a 600-yard shot. The same as if you travel to 4x, you could make a 300-yard shot, or if you travel all the way out to 600 yards, again at 6x, you can still make that appropriate shot because you have all the bullet drop characteristics that you would need. So now that we've talked all about what is a low power variable optic and first focal plane, let's go unbox it, let's put it together, and let's go test it.
So for this episode, Primary Arms supply us with the optic and with the mount that we need. I'll go over the mount in detail in just a minute. So inside of this box, let's see what we got. All right, so here we have the optic wrapped up nicely. Let's get this silly old plastic out of here. We don't need this. Wow. Okay, wow, the optics looks, man, this thing looks beautiful. I love the way that black, man, it's just such a deep black color. And it has these nice caps that are already attached, so you don't have to worry about keeping track of them. That's one thing that kind of bothers me with my Tikkas. I always have to keep tabs on the cap, so that's pretty cool. Yeah, I love the way this thing looks. So we also have the turret caps here. If you want to mess with the windage, you can hear it. It's actually pretty loud. So I'm happy with how tactile that click is, so that'll be easier for me to know if something's been... Oh, look in here! There's actually a battery that's been hidden inside this cap, so if you need an extra one, it's just hidden inside that windage cap. And if you look at the elevation turret, same thing. Oh, dang, there's no battery in here. It has that same tactile click. Just put this thing back on. And on the other side, we have the actual illumination adjustment. Let's open up the battery tray here. You can see it uses a 2032 battery. It's easy to get to. To change the illumination adjustment, you just rotate it. There's not a stop in between, so just be aware you kind of got to go all the way around to change the settings. I also found the magnification adjustment from 1 to 6 wasn't mushy and it wasn't too stiff. It was pretty easy to use and felt just right. Let's see what else is in here. Okay, so we have the instructions. Okay, so we're going to need to adjust the diopter at some point. We'll go over that in just a minute. And then we have the actual reticle. So you may want to know about some of the zeroing specifications for some different rounds and elevations. If you want to refer to this chart, it'll tell you what you need to set everything to. But once you set it, you can pretty much forget it and not worry about it ever again. All right, on the next page. Okay, so this shows the elevation and windage adjustment. Just be aware that every adjustment is in a 1/4 inch increment. And here we have a chart on the ranging. We'll go over the reticle in just a minute. And then we have windage, leading your target, and then the auto ranging function. We'll go over the reticle in detail. And here's the exact specifications and features of the reticle. All right, I think that's about it. It's in there. And yes, another cleaning cloth. We'll put that in the pile.
So be careful when buying scope mounts. You need to pay attention to the tube diameter of the scope. Sometimes they're 30 millimeters, sometimes they're 34, and sometimes they're 1 inch. The Primary Arms 1x6 Raptor and first focal point is a 30 millimeter tube. So we need to have 30 millimeter rings.
So here's our 30 millimeter cantilever scope mount. Let's go ahead and get this out of the box and take a look at it. As I said before, make sure you get the right scope ring size. As this is a 30 millimeter tube, we need 30 millimeter rings. So included also in here is a tool we can use to install everything. It needs to be torqued down properly, so I recommend the Wheeler fat wrench to actually torque it to the appropriate specifications. That wrench is not going to get you there. As you can see here, there's some very specific torque specifications that you need to follow, and if you don't, it's going to get loose. Same for the cross bolt that's actually attached to the Picatinny rail, so you're going to need a torque wrench. And it shows you how to install the actual cantilever mount. When you place it on there, just make sure to push it forward.
Alright, so before we put it all together, let me show you how this cool Primary Arms ACSS reticle actually works. It has some cool auto ranging and some wind holds that can make you super fast and accurate if you know how to use it. Let me show you how.
So one of the cool features about this reticle is it uses a fast acquisition reticle with a precision 0. So if you have multiple targets in close range, it's easy for you to engage them quickly, as the horseshoe lets you identify where your target is very fast. But let's also say you had a moving target. So the edges of the horseshoe will actually show where to place the reticle if your target is moving from left to right or right to left, and you can just put them on that edge in order to engage that target at a running speed. Now let's also say you have a target at distance. The first thing to note that the edge of the chevron tip is going to be your 100 yard. And then just below that chevron tip is going to be your 200 yard marker. And the others will be marked at the hash marks where they begin, identified here. Then you can use this reticle to then range, so it should match the span of 18 inches, which will give you your proper ranging. And then you can also zoom in on further targets to range those objects also. It gives you a quick and easy way to identify the range of a target. Now what about if we get some wind though? How are we going to deal with that? Where the reticle actually has windage also built in 5 and 10 mile per hour increments. All you need to do is range the target and then place the applicable dot on the target to adjust for the wind. Such as if you had a 7.5 mile an hour wind, you would place the target between the 10 and 5 mile per hour dots.
Okay, so now you know how to use the reticle. Let's put it together.
Alright, so the first thing we gotta do is we gotta remove the old optic, so we can just take off the magnifier here, which is easy to do. And then we'll grab some tools from our Wheeler toolkit here, and we'll go ahead and remove our Holosun 503G. I do love this optic, so that does say a lot that I'm willing to switch it out. So with the cantilever mount, we need to loosen the screws in order to place down the Picatinny mount correctly. Then if we grab the right bit, we can go ahead and loosen this thing up and get it started. We'll go ahead and take the covers off so that we can put the optic in there later. My flip-up iron sights aren't going to work anymore, so let's go in and remove those. We're not going to need this anymore. Now let's place the optic inside of the scope rings, and we're going to go ahead and place the covers for the scope ring back on top. Just make sure they're pretty even when you put them back on. Just push them down slightly. Now we're going to set the actual eye relief. So go ahead and just tighten down the mount finger tight so it doesn't move around as we mess with the optic. Get the appropriate bit, and then we're just going to finger tight these. Don't get them too tight, don't torque them down. We just want to be able to slide back and forth just a little bit so we can adjust the eye relief.
So one small tip I do recommend is grabbing like a rubber band or a ranger band and then actually laying behind the weapon and then mark with that rubber band where your actual eye sits on the stock, because then it's going to be easier to measure and set the eye relief depending on the optic. You can also sit behind it and just measure it and get it all set right, but it gets a little more challenging.
So here you can see I installed the rubber band right where my eye sits as I get on the rifle. You're also going to need a piece of paper and a flashlight. I just stole this Olight off my pistol. And as you can see, you shine the light in the front. Then as you move the paper back and forth, you can see that the focal point of the light changes. And we need to adjust the optic so that then the focal point on the paper matches the rubber band for our eye relief. And then we should be all set to try it out.
Now what you need to do here is you need to get behind the rifle in a lot of different positions. So I found that my position was perfectly fine standing, but then when I went to actual prone, I had a ton of scope shadow. So I had to make a couple more adjustments for that scope mount. So you do the same thing. It may not be perfect when you measure it, so get behind the rifle, try it out, make some adjustments so that the eye relief works in all positions. If it only works in one position, that's no good to you.
Okay, so now the eye relief is all set. Let's go ahead and torque everything down. So we're going to torque down the mount first, and we're going to set our Wheeler fat wrench to 65 inch-pounds. And then just tighten this slowly. I do about a quarter turn back and forth until I reach it, just so it tightens down uniformly and doesn't get installed all weird.
So I don't know if it was user error, but I went to 65 inch-pounds and actually the mount came loose later on. So I will recommend you put a little bit more oomph into that, a little more than 65.
So now that we're all set, let's tighten down those torque rings. We need to go to 25 inch-pounds. So we've set our torque wrench for that. Tighten everything down in a cross pattern as you go, and then just go nice and slow, quarter turn at a time, and then check the either side to make sure the gap is the same. If not, you need to loosen it and reset it. And then do the same thing on the front, going in that cross pattern, nice and slow, quarter turn at a time, until it's all torqued down.
All right, so we got everything installed and we have everything set and everything torqued down. Let's go to the range. So within my first few shots, I realized some of the give and take that comes through a first focal plane scope, and that's that illumination at 1x. That's one of the real challenges. Now, the Primary Arms 1x6 Raptor is a little bit budget friendly, so it has to sacrifice something somewhere. Now, I'm not saying the illumination is bad, it's just not super bright like a red dot would be. So it is a bit dimmer than a red dot, so I was a little bit slower, but I did find I was a good bit more accurate. Let's do some up downs first, and I'll show you how those go. So the up downs felt really comfortable and smooth, but as I noted, the reticle is a little bit challenging to see. So let's try to zoom in the reticle a little bit more so we can get some illumination on the actual reticle. Let's try it at 3 power and see if we can still do up downs, but then we can see our reticle a little bit brighter as we zoom it in. So I think one of the most interesting things about this low power variable optic, and particularly with this Primary Arms 1x6, is where my speed goes down a little bit, my accuracy has just gone through the roof. So let's go back to 1x and let's do some multi-target drills. Let's do 2 of them. So again, the thing I'm loving about this scope is I'm losing a little bit of speed, but I'm gaining a ton of accuracy. So no one really wants to miss fast. So go ahead and slow down and shoot accurately. So let's see what this reticle can do. Let's shoot a couple targets up close and then transition to some long range shots. All right, so that drill's fun. Let's do a couple more of those. Now that was fun, but I have to say this 1x6 is not designed inherently to be able to shoot close range. So let's do what this thing does best. When it's at full magnification, that reticle is super bright, and with the ACSS Primary Arms reticle, you can then instantly range multiple targets. So let's go stretch this thing out. So this is where this reticle absolutely shines. I can transition from any magnification level and have the appropriate holdovers to go from 200, 300 to 100, back and forth all over, and make all the accurate shots and just be ringing the steel on those gongs every single time. So I'm really impressed by how bright and clear the glass is. I would have thought with a budget level optic like this that they really would have sacrificed a lot in terms of the glass, but it's certainly crystal clear. I'm not sure if it's coming through on my phone. I'm trying to record through this, but it really does look great through the eye. I can make out all these targets easily, and it's easy for me to make my holdovers. I'm really having fun with this optic, and at distance, this thing is just awesome. Being able to engage multiple targets quickly at range and through multiple magnification levels is just super fun. So pros and cons of this optic. Let's start with pros. I really like how the optic changes size as it goes through magnification. That means I don't reach a weird point where I need to either be at full magnification or none. I can just have the holdovers at any point. It's really pretty amazing. So cons. I do think the illumination at 1x is not exactly daytime bright, but to have a budget-friendly optic like this in first focal plane, I think it's amazing that they've achieved what they have. So do I like this optic? I very much do. I'm very impressed going from a red dot that I really enjoyed going to a 1x6 LPVO in first focal plane, but I am interested to try out second focal plane. So hang tight for our next episode. We're going to be trying out the Primary Arms 1x6 second focal plane. Once again, thanks to Primary Arms and thanks to Wheeler Tools for sponsoring this series, and thanks to all of our Patreon supporters who make this possible, and all of you that like, comment, and subscribe. I love to hear from you. Please keep it up. All right, everybody, Walsh out.